Welcome back into another episode of the Spaceman 2.0 Phoenix Truth Rising Show. Here to help you grow in the knowledge and wisdom of truth, and the truth will set you free. So if you'd like the copy of Through Darkness into Light, one of your own, it's an over 200-page journal. Please scroll down below, and if you can donate $15 or more, and I'll ship one out to you right away. By having one of these in your hands, you're guaranteeing that this plan can unfold, because it's through able hands that we can make this work. God needs no dead martyrs. He needs living hands and feet upon this planet. So that being said, let's get back into Through Darkness into Light, Endless Cycles of the Divine Plan, Volume 1. Chapter 2, recording number 2, HATONN, May 27, 1992, 7:12 a.m., Year 5, Day 285. Year 5 started from 1987, from the time of the harmonic convergence. And isn't it interesting, we're having another one between January 23rd of 2025 and March 21st, which is today, of 2025. All the planets line up. So it is an interesting time we are living in. Wednesday, May 27, 1992. Continuation of Monday writing on the Divine Plan and places in between. The Infinite. It is the infinite of this journey which is sought and achieved. Regardless of direction, thought has laid forth. All is but cycles ending in the infinity of the whole, circle of infinity, if you will. The journey will spiral always on to such a time as thought projection takes you into the sequence of events which allows for learning and passage. Each experience a portion adding to the whole until the circle becomes one. Let us look briefly at the symbolic circle, which can well indicate an ending or a beginning of the circle of experience and expression manifest in the life stream of the fragment in expression, projected outward and returning honed and learned in knowing onto oneness once again, a sequence, not a time, a segment, not a space. In this wondrous connection of the circle to itself, one can perceive perhaps a destiny in which the world is gone. As you come into the oneness with Creator, into this voidance of time and space, all will be at peace and rest without perception of impact upon the blessed wholeness of being. Even the music is gone, but there need be no perception of such, for that which replaces the senses of music is that which becomes the music and needs no hearing. There is only infinite reality symbolized by the circle of endless time. This is what teachers have called Tao, Nirvana, whatever the term according to communication of intent and definition. The illusion of the world and the illusion of the self in the world both come to an end. Only infinite reality remains. This integration represents conquest of the world and its illusion. When the world is conquered, it fades away. Only truth remains. Truth, nameless, formless, limitless. Truth to be discovered only by inward experience and dwelling with the oneness within, and the knowing of the mystery of that which before had only been symbols. May the truth rest gently upon your being, that you might find your way more clearly. Knowledge. What then is it that we are after in our searching, our journey? We look for truth, knowing, and returning in wholeness onto source, always leaving that which is truth for the generations to come. It is always through enforced ignorance that man is conquered by the adversary of God. Enlighten man, and you have no adversary. Truth and knowing gives the freedom long sought as goal unto eternity and infinite balance, in harmony with all. So what has happened through the ages that man has tempered and destroyed to keep from the people created in such perfection and intelligent God reason? The great stores of knowledge were destroyed, rewritten, changed to serve the power-hungry and rulers of the physical experience. In other words, evil, for only physical human has created evil. All other expressions simply are. So where does the story, this never-ending story, take up? Memory patterns, which allows for insight. We choose to reveal that which can be connected within your own oral mythology. With the closing of cycles, truth must be left for the next sequence of experience, so that in the ending of each cycle, truth can come again, as the hosts are always sent with the messengers to prepare for the coming again of information long stored against the day of recovery, to give confirmation and understanding in measured input, allowing belief and comprehension, for man cannot longer stand shock against his density in manifestation. He has moved too far into the darkness and away from his very substance, the photon, expression as light. Since we, my scribe and I, often move back into an experience upon which to bring understanding within our connection, we journey into the memory of those times of Egyptians in recognition of HATONN and feeble beginnings at recognition of truth. Constantly comes the testing of readiness of species and civilizations, in the density of placement in the cause of learning. Always it has been the thrust of the elite would-be gods to destroy and change truth, to deceive and maintain power. Why think ye that places such as the great libraries, such as that of Alexandrian Library, were destroyed? But were the writings in truth, or simply a place of scholars and projection of opinion and already tampered documentation, which would further pull mankind from his direction of lighted paths? That which awed and awes the world are usually the imperfections of ego-oriented man. What happened at Alexandria? Let us look a bit at the setting and see if perhaps there was yet much to be desired in the writings, either before or after the destruction of scrolls and sheets of scribblings. Writing usually is only a method of setting down in misinformation to remind the readers of the lies and to reinforce same. Truth abides in the memory and can never be completely destroyed. This is why the oral traditions, even with symbols misunderstood by the masses, hold the actual truth of evolvement and connections with infinite, eternal experience. Destruction of Alexandrian Library. Since I have now spoken of Alexandria, let us consider what happened as historically expressed. It is generally acknowledged that the ancient Egyptians possessed an extraordinary knowledge of the arts and sciences. The earliest pharaohs were patrons of learning in all its branches. Their priests and philosophers were noted among the most scholarly of men. I did not say knowledgeable, I said scholarly. The architecture of the Egyptians awed the world for centuries, and their wisdom in chemistry, anatomy, medicine, and astronomy was no less amazing. How could it be? Even to limited perception, one must realize that something came prior to this wisdom of earth's scholars. Under the dynasty of Ptolemies, in the city of Alexandria became a mecca for so-called scholars. The studious of all nations congregated there to enjoy unparalleled opportunities for mental self-improvement. And perhaps this is when massive mental disinformation really got a strong hold on civilization. Poets, historians, philosophers, and dramatists assembled in the city of the Ptolemies, largely to consult the vast libraries which had been accumulated by the pharaohs of this illustrious line. I would note herein that the only pharaoh of the time period who was worthy of any note at all was one called Akhenaton. Therefore, if the libraries were allowed and filled with great wisdom, it undoubtedly was the wisdom chosen by the ruler in power at the time, and by simply deductive reasoning, it was not of God in intent. Knowledge, like a magnet, draws more knowledge to itself, even if it be erroneous input, and by the 2nd century before the so-called Christian era, the city of Alexandria had become a veritable metropolis of books. Its libraries are referred to in ancient documents as the glory of the world, the axis of the intellectual universe. The misinformation in the prior words is enough to make you barf if you have a weak stomach. In addition to numerous private libraries collected by specialists in various departments of learning, and the secret collections written in the hieratic glyphs of the priests, there were 2 immense public collections. The largest of these was the Bruchium, which formed a branch of the National Museum of Antiquities. It contained some 490,000 papyri, volumes, tablets, and inscriptions, magnificently arranged in the niches and wings of a great rotunda-like gallery. Do you see how much more vastly disinformation can flow this day? Anyone with a personal computer can flush through waste at incredible speeds and completely bury the mind of man in total garbage, or worse, deceive man into believing he must have interpreters and go-betweens, authorities other than self and saviors to take his burden and save even his soul. The second and smaller public collection, devoted almost exclusively to obscure forms of knowledge, and therefore probably of greater practical value, was contained in the temple of Serapis, the patron deity of the Ptolemies. This building, called the Serapeum, housed 42,800 rolls preserved in fireproof containers shaped somewhat like buckets with tightly fitted lids. The various private collections brought the total number of priceless literature treasures in Alexandria to a figure exceeding 1 million documents. This was a mighty feat and accomplishment, even if not pure in intent or content. It is difficult to compare this ancient collection with any modern library. Many institutions of the present day contain a larger number of books, as for example, even before the age of the electronic brains or brainless machinery in the late 1930s, the British Museum had over 75 miles of bookshelves. This did not include the new thrust in writing of the British Zionist Khazarian plan of world conquest and other than subtle form. The real blueprints were kept in even more hidden places. The Alexandrian collection was made up entirely of handwritten works, for the most part unique copies of the greatest antiquity, each of which today would be worth a king's ransom, but not for the proper reason of truth and content, simply value of antiquity. How interesting that one could not purchase an Alexandrian collection at any price today, again, not because of its quality of knowledge implied, but because of its antiquity, which instructions were destructive then and have only been built upon since the writings. Actually, 3 disasters. How did the Alexandria Library actually fall into destruction? Well, it probably differs a bit from what you perceive and have been told. It was not deliberately burned, as is assumed. Actually, Caesar didn't give a hang about the library. In the 1st century BC, Cleopatra contested with her brother for the throne of Egypt. Caesar ordered the burning of the fleet in the harbor of Alexandria. A strong wind rose, the fire reached the docks and spread. Before the conflagration could be checked, it had destroyed the Bruchium and the greater part of the city. When Cleopatra entered Alexandria under the favor of Caesar, she ordered herself carried to the ruins of the great library. She beheld a veritable mountain of charred manuscripts and rolls, and the Queen of the Sun cursed her ancestors that they had not made adequate provision to protect the library from fire. She knew a good antique when she saw one. The burning of the Bruchium was regarded by the Egyptians as a national disaster, and by way of atonement, Rome presented to Cleopatra several valuable collections of manuscripts, which it had accumulated from conquered peoples. Mark Antony was especially active in the restoration of the Bruchium. Surely enough, the new rulers could rewrite history to suit themselves. The great Alexandrian libraries were a second time destroyed by Aurelian about AD 273. The Serapeum was completely razed by the Christians in AD 389 upon the edict of Theodosius. The colossal statue of the weeping god Serapis, which stood in the midst of the Serapeum, also was demolished at this time. Alexandria never entirely recovered from the third catastrophe. The love of learning lingered on, however, until the last of the great collections was entirely wiped out by Amru the Saracen in AD 640. Thus perished the glory of the world. The sanctuaries of the arts and sciences, mother of wisdom and knowledge, has continued its decline ever since at the hands of liars and despots. As it were asked that humanity has lost through the If it were asked what humanity has lost through the destruction of the Alexandrian libraries, it will be said that after Alexandria came the Dark Ages, the total eclipse of essential learning. I would not be so kind, for I would suggest that the Dark Ages came just prior to the great and wondrous building of the libraries. Today, 100 branches of art, science, philosophy, and religion are laboring frantically and painfully to restore that which was wrong and incorrect in the first place. The lost arts and sciences, the secrets of everlasting pigments, the mystery of malleable glass and ever-burning lamps, and the transmutation of metals are among the losses as stated by modern scholars, and actually are listed as minor losses. What in heaven's name is important losses? Transmutation of metals, a minor loss? Wake up, little sheeple, the barn is on fire. The greater tragedy, however, is the loss of the factual histories of the antediluvian world, the beginnings of civilization, even the tampered, still bearing the myths which did hold the fragments of truth, the origin of races, philosophies, religions, and sciences, the accumulated knowledge of the lost Atlantis, and the story of its final destruction, when, according to the Mayans, it sank some 10 to 12,000 or so years ago, carrying 60 millions of souls into transition in a single night, not to mention the slow decay and degradation of the experience. Thus, the most precious secrets of human origin, to which you have recovered only the faintest clues, vanished in smoke. However, I can promise you that by this day there would be nothing of truth to be found within those vaults at any rate. I sincerely hope that you ones will go and read of the times of Alexandria, and the Khazarians in the journals, if you have been given lies instead of rebirthing of truth through those destructions of ancient times. To connect the stories, it may appear that I jump hither and yon in my outlay of input. I must do this because there are ones in receiving who are being given their instructions and confirmations in bits and pieces, and those ones are scattered to the various critical locations for service and guardianship of that which was laid safe against this day of transition, coming into knowing and passage of a remnant, a return of the bird tribes, if you will, a regathering of eagles among the bird people, that fulfillment of the instructions for passage might be brought into manifestation for the flight migration. Cooperation and survival. It is not a case of survival of the fittest, as your belief systems based on short-term observation proclaim. It is a case of flourishment of the most cooperative based on truth, wisdom, and reaching for balance, harmony, and oneness with the source. As we have spoken of the lighted particles of molecular structure according to a DNA blueprint, so too does the divine plan have DNA blueprint. Just as distinct little beings work together to produce each completed human cell, there are spirit beings designed to work in symbiotic cooperation with each human ego. There are many names for us. We have been called angels, bird tribes, bird people, higher selves, hoaxadas, spirits of the stars, and thus and so. The reality of what we are is more than a name can convey. We are the multiple projections of the Eternal One, spirits designed to blend with present-day humans. You now consider yourselves to be your egos, but egos are only a portion, perhaps the one most destructive to growth as aspect of the human equation. The complete human is a spirit-ego partnership. You are individualized aspects of one holy and eternal being. You are your spirits as they exist apart from the spell of matter. You do not evolve, you incarnate. Your intelligence is pre-existent. Your identities, highly focused frequencies of starlight. You need us of the guides to be whole, just as we need you to fully enter and do our work in the physical plane as we fulfill our purpose. We all seek to awaken in your minds and hearts, to incarnate in your bodies, that you might realize the purpose and intent of your journey. We are sent to return your home circuitry to its creator and again into knowing. Yet your human egos are the guardians of the circuitry, the stewards of your minds and hearts, and without your ego's cooperation, our bonding and sharing is impossible. You ego-ruled humans who feud and fight among yourselves do not realize the obvious. The very values that you employ to determine your social behavior would, if employed by your body parts, effectively block any cooperative association of ribosomes, enzymes, mitochondria, and other little life forms of crystalline life force from providing you with even a single coherent cell, to say nothing of a healthy and integral human body. Hundreds of thousands of little beings, all working voluntarily together, make a human body what it is. It is not a case of survival of the fittest, you must come to see, as your belief systems based on short-term observation of the universe verifies, or seems to verify. It is rather a case of flourishment of the most cooperative, as all long-term observation of the universe verifies. It is through cooperation with one another that diverse forms of life adapt and thrive, and it is only through the symbiotic cooperation of a multitude of simpler organisms that more complex organisms like your bodies are able to come into existence at all. Optimum moment is here. At critical stages in their development, life forms cooperate for their own advantage with other separate and distinct life forms. Over time, their cooperation results in union. A new organism comes into being. Again and again, this occurs in the formation of complex life forms. This is analogous to what is about to happen again as your late 20th century human world reaches the optimal moment for materially oriented, ego-ruled human beings to be joined by their spirit world counterparts, us. Your race is soon to experience widespread awakenings, or as some will see it, a massive descent of beings from the stars. We represent the dreams of the Great Spirit, the true dreams, the truth, the clear dreams, the pure dreams, never tainted by fear, never touched by any motivation other than the motivation of love. And yet we are dreams nevertheless. Thoughts, discarnate beings drifting formless through a universe that has placed the highest value on form, living in the consciousness of the Creator, whose desire is to take form in the very creature that will result from our bonding with you in an effort to help you remember what and who you are. We are sent, come, to remind you and again bring knowledge, truth, and wisdom within your beings, that you can find your way back within the infinite circle of reality. Our spiritual intelligence is the missing dimension, the rejected aspect of your own wholeness. For thousands of years you have been afraid of us. Many of you are now learning that you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by establishing contact with us once again. It is only your ego that makes you fear. Your ego is here to look after your physical body, to make sure it gets enough to eat, to make sure it does not walk over the edge of a cliff or damage itself unknowingly. Your ego is the steward and potential master of all material plane fears,